1 Introduction. The city on water. Soft orchestral music fades in. The camera glides above an emerald lagoon. Shimmering canals, ancient bridges, and gondolas emerge through the morning mist. Narrator, VO. There is a city unlike any other on earth. A city where streets are rivers, and cars are replaced by boats. A city built not on land, but upon the restless waters of the Adriatic Sea. For over 1,000 years, Venice has defied time, tide, and logic. It has survived empires, plagues, floods, and wars. It has dazzled travelers, inspired artists, and puzzled engineers. But beneath its beauty lies a story of ingenuity, ambition, and survival. A story written in wood, stone, and salt water. This is the story of Venice. La Serenissima, the most serene republic. The Queen of the Adriatic. The city that should have sunk long ago, but never did. 2 Origins. Fleeing the fall of Rome. Scene fades to a map of ancient Italy, 5th century CE. The Roman Empire fractures. Barbarian tribes sweep across the north. Narrator, VO. The story of Venice begins not with triumph, but with fear. In the 5th century, the Western Roman Empire was collapsing. Waves of invaders, Goths, Vandals, and Huns descended upon the Italian mainland, leaving destruction in their wake. Cities that had once thrived under Roman law and trade, Padua, Aquileia, Altinum, were burned and abandoned. Those who survived fled to the only place left untouched by conquest: the marshy lagoons of the Adriatic coast. Here, in the shallow waters between sea and land, they found refuge among reeds and sandbanks. The invaders' horses could not follow. The marshes were treacherous, the channels shifting, the air thick with mist. It was a dangerous place, but it was safe. Scene: reenactment of refugees building huts on stilts, fishing, collecting reeds. The first Venetians were not conquerors or kings. They were fishermen, salt workers, and traders, refugees who learned to live with the tides. They built their homes on small islands of sand and mud, binding the foundations with stakes of wood driven deep into the sediment. They created paths between the islands using wooden planks and boats. What began as a desperate act of survival slowly evolved into something extraordinary. A city that would one day command the seas. By the year 421, according to tradition, Venice was born. A date still celebrated today as the city's founding day. 3. The rise of the Maritime Republic. Scene transition, the year 800 CE. The camera pans across the shimmering lagoon, now dotted with wooden homes and docks. Narrator, VO. Over the next centuries, Venice transformed from a cluster of refugee islands into a thriving community. The sea, once its shield, became its lifeline. Its people learned to master the art of navigation. They built swift, agile ships capable of crossing the Adriatic and beyond. They traded salt, fish, and timber with the Byzantine Empire, their distant allies in Constantinople. Venice's position, between East and West, became its greatest advantage. It stood at the crossroads of 2 worlds. The Christian kingdoms of Europe and the dazzling markets of the East. By the 9th century, Venice had begun to emerge as a republic, independent in spirit, loyal to none but itself. And in the year 828, a legend was born that would define Venice forever. Scene reenactment: two Venetian merchants steal the relics of Saint Mark from Alexandria, smuggling them past Muslim guards hidden beneath pork fat. The relics of Saint Mark the Evangelist were brought from Egypt to Venice, a bold and dangerous act. The city adopted him as its patron saint, and the symbol of Saint Mark the winged lion became the emblem of Venice. Over the centuries, the Venetians built a grand basilica in his honor. Saint Mark's Basilica, a shimmering masterpiece of Byzantine domes, golden mosaics, and marble columns from distant lands. St. Mark's Square became the heart of the city, the place where religion, politics, and ceremony intertwined. Venice was rising, not by conquest, but by commerce and by faith in its own destiny. For the power and politics of Venice. Scene: sweeping views of the Doge's palace, its pink marble glowing in the afternoon light. Narrator: VO. As Venice grew in wealth, it needed order. It could not remain a loose collection of merchants and sailors forever. And so, it became a republic ruled not by kings, but by councils. At the heart of the republic was the Doge, the elected leader of Venice. Chosen for life, the Doge wore robes of gold and a cap shaped like the prow of a ship, a reminder that Venice owed its life to the sea. But his power was limited. He was watched by councils, magistrates, and committees that ensured no man could rise too high. Venice feared tyranny more than it feared enemies. It was a city of balance, of laws, and secrecy. Even the Doge could not open foreign correspondence without witnesses. Every decision, from trade to war, passed through layers of government: the Great Council, the Senate, the Council of Ten. The Republic was built like its architecture: stable, layered, elegant, and incredibly complex. And from this order came power. Venice's fleets grew larger. Its merchants sailed across the Mediterranean, to Crete, Cyprus, and Alexandria. Its arsenal, a vast shipyard, became the most advanced industrial complex in medieval Europe. At its height, the Venetian arsenal employed over 16,000 workers. Ships were built in assembly line fashion, a century before the Industrial Revolution. From this lagoon city came an empire not of land, but of trade. And Venice's empire stretched across the seas. 5. The Golden Age: trade, art, and empire. Scene: bustling markets of the 13th century, spices and silks glimmering under the Mediterranean sun. Narrator: VO. Between the 12th and 15th centuries, Venice reached its zenith. It dominated the trade routes between Europe and the East. Silk, spices, and gold flowed into its markets. Its merchants grew fabulously wealthy, and with wealth came art. Venice became a city of beauty. Palaces rose along the Grand Canal, their facades painted and carved with marble from distant quarries. Artists such as Titian, Tintoretto, and Veronese filled its churches and halls with color and light. Music filled the air, the echoes of Vivaldi's violins drifting from gilded theaters. The city glowed like a floating jewel, its light reflected in the water below. But wealth also brought ambition and conflict. During the Crusades, Venice supplied fleets to transport armies eastward. In 1204, its ships carried the Fourth Crusade not to Jerusalem, but to Constantinople, the greatest Christian city in the East. When the Crusaders sacked Constantinople, Venice claimed its share of the spoils. treasures, land, and influence. The bronze horses that stand atop St. Mark's Basilica today were taken from the Hippodrome of Constantinople. They are the symbol of a moment when Venice's power reached its greatest height, but also when its moral compass began to waver. Venice had become a merchant empire, a city that measured faith in profit and virtue in victory. Still, in its splendor, it was unmatched. By the 15th century, Venice was one of the richest and most powerful cities in the world. A beacon of civilization, artistry, and freedom. 6. Decline, invasion, and survival. Scene: the horizon darkens. The sound of cannons echoes across the lagoon. Narrator: VO. Every empire must face its twilight. For Venice, the fall came not with one blow, but with a series of slow, unstoppable tides. The discovery of new trade routes to India and the Americas in the late 15th century shifted commerce away from the Mediterranean. The sea that had made Venice rich no longer led to the world's markets. The Ottoman Empire rose in the east, closing ports and claiming islands once ruled by Venice. Wars drained its treasury and its strength. The plague struck repeatedly, killing tens of thousands. And yet, Venice endured even as Europe changed around it. By the 18th century, the Republic had become a shadow of its former self, a place of beauty, decadence, and nostalgia. Its diplomats still wore fine silk, its carnivals still dazzled visitors, but the world had moved on. Then came Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1797, after more than 1,000 years of independence, Venice surrendered to Napoleon without a fight. The Lion of St. Mark was torn down from its pillars. The Republic, the most enduring in European history, ceased to exist. After Napoleon's fall, Venice was handed to Austria, and later, in 1866, it became part of a unified Italy. The city that once ruled an empire was now a relic, a memory floating on water. 7. Modern Venice, the eternal city of water. Scene: sunrise over the lagoon. Gondolas glide across the canal. Tourists and locals walk the narrow alleys. Narrator: VO. Today, Venice remains a marvel of human ingenuity. Its foundations, millions of wooden piles driven into the mud centuries ago, still hold. They have turned to stone beneath the waves, preserved by the oxygenless water that surrounds them. But the challenges are greater than ever. Rising seas and the phenomenon of aqua alta high water flood the city more frequently each year. Tourism strains its fragile ecosystem. Fewer than 50,000 residents now live in the historic center. And yet, the spirit of Venice endures. Its festivals, its art, its light all remain. Modern engineers have built barriers, called moats, to protect it from floods. Architects and historians work tirelessly to preserve its beauty. For Venice is not just a city, it is a miracle. A place where humanity learned to live with nature rather than against it. Scene: aerial view at sunset. Bells ring from St. Mark's Campanile. The lagoon shimmers in gold. Narrator: VO. Venice has always been a paradox. A city born from fear, that became a symbol of power. A city built on water, that has outlasted empires built on stone. And though its future is uncertain, its story continues to echo across the canals, beneath the bridges, and within the hearts of all who walk its narrow streets. Venice is eternal. The city of water, the city of dreams. The city that refused to sink.